I am Jay Martin, and I'm the executive director of what is now known as Legal Services for Maine Elders. We changed our name on Monday to make a use of some more respectful terms as it relates to older people. So we are now Legal Services for Maine Elders. I've been with LSE for 18 years now, and it's a real pleasure of my life to get to be part of the organization. And Jill, I'll let you introduce yourself before we switch to the screen.
Yeah, again, thanks for inviting us tonight. So I'm the Helpline and Medicare Advocacy Services Director. I've been at LSC now for, I think, about 14 years.
Yeah, and if you want to picture a face when you make the call to us for help, if you do, Jill's a good face to picture. She works with a team of attorneys and paralegals that are really on the front line of answering those first calls for help. And we'll talk later about if you're not sure whether to call, she's the one that can always help you sort that out. So a little bit first about what we'll talk about today, what we're going to cover. Again, reserving time for questions. We're going to talk first, give an overview of the services. Might go back one, Jill. I think we might have. Oh, okay. Um, and the reasons to come for help. Um, and also, and I see what's going on. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Jill. Advance the slide. Sorry, everybody. So first, our mission. Of course, mission first. Um, and it's to provide free legal services to older Mainers 60 or older. And that 60 or older is not really our choice. It is a result of some federal rules and regulations we need to comply with. So it is a 60 or older frame. We also advocate for those that seek Medicare benefits. Talk more about that. Services are offered statewide. Services are entirely free of charge. And very important, many people who call us for help, confidential. We would only talk to somebody about what you called us about if you gave us permission to do that. Otherwise, if you're our client, our communications are with you, and what you tell us is held in confidence unless you give permission otherwise. And then what we're going to cover today, an overview of our services, give you some examples of the reasons you might want to call us for help, and tell you a little bit more about the Medicare kinds of problems that we can help with. Again, who's eligible to get this free legal help from LSE? It's anyone 60 or older who is a Maine resident. And then we only help with civil legal problems, not criminal legal problems. And if you're not sure about that, you're going to hear this over and over tonight, but call us and we'll help sort out whether you have a civil or criminal legal problem, and we'll refer you elsewhere if it's a criminal problem. And all of our services are really focused on the kinds of things that are keeping an older person from meeting their basic human needs: shelter, food, heat, safety, financial stability. Those are the kinds of things that we focus our resources on. So how do you get our help? We try to make it as simple as we can. You think you have a legal problem, you call our statewide helpline. The number is toll free. If you can't use a phone or don't have access to a phone, you can have someone help you make the call, or you could have somebody call on your behalf and explain your situation. And then we are going to work to figure out how to get you through the door without using the telephone. But we find the vast majority of the people that need our help are able to get to us by phone. There are two intake paralegals answering the phones all day, every day, Monday through Friday, 12 to 1, 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. And if you called after hours, you could leave a message and we will call you back the next business day. So if you want our help, we want you to get through to us and hopefully get your call answered promptly. So then what happens after that? What happens after you make that request? A couple things that are kind of technical but important is we really, if you're an older person that needs our help, we really need to have you ask for our help. If you're concerned about a neighbor or a friend, you're concerned about someone else, you won't be able to call us and ask us to help that other person. There are ethical reasons and other reasons we're not able to do that, but it is important that we get the request from the person who needs help or somebody with legal authority to make the request, like a power of attorney. And again, somebody can assist an individual with making the call, but we need to hear from the person who needs our help that they want our help. You can imagine sometimes too, other people might think a person needs help, but they don't. And again, we want to be very respectful of the person who would ultimately be our client. Yeah, I'd be happy to take a question. Go right ahead.
So, my dad, who's 92, um, I wouldn't be able to call. He would have to call you, even though I'm not his power of attorney. He doesn't have a power of attorney. He doesn't think he needs one.
Right. You could, yeah, that is correct, but you could call with him. You could call
Okay.
with him. So, and if you have barriers around trying to put together a conference call, we could even assist with that. But we would need him on the line
Okay.
saying that he wants our help, and then he could give us permission to complete the rest of the intake with you, for example,
Okay. All right.
once we've spoken to him. Yeah,
That works. Okay.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. We try to make it as easy as we can, but there's kind of a bright line rule for us around hearing from the person who needs our help. And again, if we get permission to speak to someone else, then we can do that and maybe complete the intake that way. So then what happens once you've called? Well, we do what we call an intake, but it's really getting very basic information about the person. Some demographic information we need to gather, age and gender and uh, things like that. Um, and a really kind of a brief notion of what the problem is that the person needs help with. And that information is gathered by an intake paralegal, and then you would be called back by an attorney. And so it is a two-step process. But in terms of how quickly it moves, if it's an urgent matter, um, we try to get the return calls made as soon as possible. If it is not an urgent or emergency matter, then we return the calls in the order they're received. That's a fair way to do that. But typically get back to people within 3 to 5 business days. Um, so then an attorney is going to call you back, but how much help are you really going to get with your problem? And it really depends on the type of problem. We have two different types of attorneys that are part of our staff. We have helpline attorneys that provide help exclusively via telephone. Now, they can review documents, they can make calls on your behalf to a landlord or a court. They can do all kinds of things to help you, but you're not going to meet them in person. You're not going to sit down at a table with your paperwork with them. They're going to help you via phone. And we solve a lot of problems that way, and it lets us help a lot more people to be able to do some of our services that way. But we also have staff attorneys, and the staff attorneys actually would represent somebody, say, in court that's facing eviction or an administrative hearing that's had their home care benefits cut or reduced or facing some other issue like that. And the staff attorney may very well sit down with you and go through your paperwork, again, appear in court on your behalf, provide a much more intensive level of service. So how much service you get will depend on the kind of problem that you have, but we'll be very clear with you about what you can expect. So hopefully there'll be no misunderstanding about what we can do and what we maybe can't do. So I'm going to turn it over to Jill now. Again, she's really the one that's right there hearing and seeing these calls come in every day, and she's going to give you some examples of the kinds of things that you or somebody you know might benefit from getting help with.
So I'll go through some common legal problems that we see and how we might be able to help. And please, we're a small group, so if you have a question, just wave your hand or do something to get my attention. So one common area is someone's physically abusing or threatening an older person. So these are, as you can imagine, really hard situations. But the lawyer will explain the client's rights, and may be able to represent them at a hearing to seek protection. I mean, the big thing that we do in these cases, because they are really difficult cases, often involving, somebody close to that client, is, as Jay mentioned, our services are confidential. And so sometimes people just call us because they want to know, well, what are my rights? What are my options? How might you be able to help me? And so the attorney will explain all that, and it's up to the client whether or not they want to work with us and take any action. They may just want to know what their rights are and what their options are. Another problem is an older person's having trouble paying the mortgage. And so what we'll do is explain the foreclosure process, get some information about where the person is in that process and what sort of led them to that point. And may be able to represent them in a foreclosure mediation, to see if we can work out some deal with the mortgage holder, so that the person can remain in the home, at a with a mortgage that's more affordable. So another problem, someone's misusing an older person's money or property. They don't know how to stop it or get the property back. So again, an attorney would talk through the situation, what's happening, depending what depending what all the facts are, may take steps to stop the exploitation, try to recover the lost assets, and help restore the client's credit rating. So this is a case where Jay mentioned, some situations an attorney may sit down and go through paperwork. This is a sort of case where that would happen. To figure out, what happened, where have these assets maybe gone, and we may file a lawsuit to try to recover those assets. So an older person's being evicted. So we would explain their rights, determine if there's a defense. We may negotiate a reasonable move-out date. It may appear in court on the client's behalf. And I know sometimes people think, well, I'm being evicted because I've fallen behind in my rent, and that's just the way it is. There's nothing that can be done. And I always tell people, call us. Even if you think this is a lost cause, there's nothing that can be done, definitely call us, because our staff attorneys are often able to negotiate move-out dates, if, depending what the situation is. And so it's just really important to make sure a person knows what their rights are. And there are, really strict laws and rules about the eviction process, and we can determine whether the landlord's following that process that they need to, and what a client's options might be. So an older person's main care or other public benefits have been denied or reduced, or an older person's being discharged from a nursing home. So in these cases, of course, we would explain their rights. We may be able to provide representation at a hearing to try to restore those benefits. We're seeing a lot of the main care and Medicare savings program terminations right now as part of you've probably heard the unwinding of the public health emergency, because during the public health emergency, people couldn't be terminated from benefits, but now reviews have started. And so we'll review that to see, if DHHS has maybe made a mistake. And if they have, we'll work to restore those benefits. And we also work not only with community main care in the Medicare savings program, but also, as Jay mentioned, long-term care main care, the home care benefits, and also if somebody's being discharged from a nursing home. Those are cases that we'll get involved with and work closely with partners in those matters. So sometimes people call us because they're just feeling overwhelmed by debt, and they're not really sure what their options are. So we would advise them if they're being sued by a debt collector. We'll advise them as to that lawsuit, and we would also answer questions about the creditor's collection practices if there's some concern about how they're going about doing that. And depending on the situation, it may be something that we can write a letter to a creditor explaining the situation, and sometimes once a judgment's entered, that would be the end of it, or we may refer the person to talk to a bankruptcy attorney, again, depending what the situation is.
I just jump in, Jill, and really reinforce on this one. Just like you talked about earlier, if you're facing eviction, you think nothing can be done, and debt can be so overwhelming, and the creditors can be so aggressive in their practices. But this is an important area to pick up the phone and call. We do talk to people that are choosing to pay types of debt that they may not need to and are not able to pay for prescription drugs or food or other kind of medical needs. And it's just a huge relief when they can talk to an attorney and find out that maybe some of what they're trying to pay down or pay off is maybe something they don't have to be so worried about. So this is a really important area, and we help a lot of people in this area.
Yeah, and I know talking, nobody wants to talk about their problems with debt, but again, confidential. So when someone calls us, we would counsel them, and of course, unless we had permission, what we're told is confidential, so we wouldn't share it with anyone. So sometimes an older person's landlord won't address unsafe housing concerns. Or there may be other housing issues, such as the person maybe is moved and they're having trouble getting their security deposit back. And so we, explain what the person's rights are. We may help negotiate with the landlord, explain the next steps to try to get a problem resolved. But we see a fair number of these sort of unsafe housing situations where, maybe there's a pest issue in the apartment and the landlord just, has decided that they don't need to try to fix it. And so those can just be really hard situations when a person feels like they don't have peace in their own home. An older person's friends and family are saying that they need a will or a power of attorney. They aren't sure if it's needed or how to get one. And so we would explain, what a will is, what a power of attorney is, how those work, how to get one. And we would explain, provide some trusted resources to get those documents prepared. So we also help, actually, I should stop there. Are there any questions about any of the legal services? I'll stop the share here for a minute.
Thank you. I had a little bit of difficulty signing in, so perhaps you already covered this, but I wondered, is there a charge for your services?
No, our services are free.
And so is there an income qualification regarding those free services? I'm representing a gentleman. I have a real estate license, and I'm representing a gentleman who's in a veterans home. And I discovered that he didn't have any medical, financial, or power of attorney or will. And I called the veterans home because I was concerned that if he became incapacitated, that we couldn't fulfill his wishes to sell the property and distribute the funds to his daughter. So the social worker got Pine Tree Legal, I guess, involved. And I guess the fact that he had a home, regardless of the condition, that disqualified him from services. But she did get an attorney to come from Augusta to visit with him. And they've drawn up all the appropriate documents now. And he does, and I was particularly concerned because the person they were calling for medical permissions didn't have an appropriate document giving her that legal authority. And I was afraid she'd get in trouble at some point for making decisions on his behalf without legal documentation. So I just wonder, I was surprised to hear that people could be at a veterans home and have no one really caring for them, and that they wouldn't address the fact that they didn't have any will or any appropriate documentation. I would have thought, I was one of the founders of the elder care home here on Vinyl Haven, and that part of our initial paperwork, who do we call if there's a problem? Do you have various medical documents in hand? So this isn't something I assume that you all would help people with, but how do people who don't have these things, who need them, actually access these kinds of services if they have to call you and they're not even aware of the fact that they need these things, and that the people who are making decisions for them could get in difficulties with family members or something down the road?
Yeah.
It's a very tricky situation.
Yeah, it is, and it's there's some complexity to what we can help with and where we'll make a referral, but it's always the right first step to call us. And the threshold question you asked about, is there a financial test that we do when somebody calls for help? And there is not.
Hmm.
But what you're going to find is the kinds of problems we're going to help with are probably primarily problems that are being faced by low income people. So
Mhm.
but we don't at the door, so to speak, screen for any particular financial ability. Um, and so that just to answer that question, I wanted to say that. And as it relates to wills, I may let you talk about that, Jill, in terms of when where we're at with what we would do if somebody needed a will, we or power of attorney or things like that. Um, there's an autonomy issue related to all of these documents, and um, it's my understanding that a facility could certainly encourage someone to, we often use the word, get their affairs in order. But they could be encouraged to do that, and you could explain to somebody why it might be wise for them to have an agent under a power of attorney or a healthcare advance directive. But I think generally speaking, you would not find it a practice that it would be a requirement in order to get services from a facility. If somebody said, I feel like I'm all set and here's my emergency contact, right? Here's the number you call in the case of an emergency, then you wouldn't generally find a facility is going to say, well, then we aren't going to, you can't come through our doors. Because again, there just are some autonomy issues there that are also really important. So we view these things as if you educate and people understand the value, then they can make a choice whether it's the time in their life they're gonna do those things. As far as our level of service, Jill, in the will and power of attorney area, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. And so what we would do with that kind of call is the helpline attorney would explain what those documents are. Because there is a lot of misinformation about what document does what, when is it effective, all of that. And then we do have, so those are not documents that we would draft, but we do have private attorneys who take cases at reduced rates. And so the helpline attorney would ask the client a few questions about their finances to see if they would qualify. And if they do, then one of our intake paralegals would reach out to one of our panel attorneys to see who might be able to take the case for that reduced rate. And then we would make that referral.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, and the one exception to that general uh, situation is if somebody of very, very, very limited means needed just a power of attorney document, we might be able to assist with that. And again, it would be somebody who wasn't going to need a will or do any kind of planning around their estate or assets, that kind of thing. And as far as the healthcare advance directive, um, there is an approved form for that, and we definitely point people to that all the time. It's available on our website as well. There is absolutely a best practice as it relates to that document in terms of one that we would recommend anyway that's used.
So we can go just to your website and get that advanced care directive.
Yes. Yeah. It's the Maine Hospital Association form that's on there.
If you have any trouble finding it, just reach out. We'll make sure Margaret knows Margaret's got my email, and just if there's any trouble at all. But I think you'll find it's pretty straightforward. We have a elder rights handbook on the website, and you'll see a section on that is on this type of document, and there's also a search function. But you run any hitches, you let us know.
It's just legal services of Maine elders.com.
It's Maine LSE. MAINE L S in Sam E.
My husband died a few months ago, and we both had wills and everything. I just need to have the right pathway to go to get things perhaps put in my name. and there's a boat involved and vehicles and um I've been told that maybe I have to go to the probate clerk. I'm just not sure of the procedure and if there was an outline of that on your website.
There's some general information on the process on our website, but you could certainly call and speak to a helpline attorney who would explain the process and then would, there are some situations where probate may not be necessary and depending what there are for assets and how things are titled, or it may be that it would be helpful to consult with a probate attorney. And so our helpline attorneys could sort that out. So you could feel free to call us and we could talk through that. Our Medicare services. So for our legal help, we said a person has to be 60 years of age for assistance. But for our Medicare services, we can help people of any age, so long as they have Medicare or they're eligible for Medicare. And so we help people. One of the things we do is help people getting prescription drugs under Part D. And so we provide free help to low-income Mainers who have Medicare, but they're having trouble getting or affording their medications. And so we have a separate toll-free number there on the screen. The one with all the sevens is how we describe it. Our phone lines are open Monday to Friday, same as the helpline, Monday to Friday, 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. An example of how we help. So sometimes a person's Medicare Part D plan doesn't cover the medication that the doctor's prescribed, or it only covers it with restrictions and there's no approval in place. And so what we do is we will work with the doctor to get the medication covered if the doctor is saying, this is the medication the person needs, or find a suitable alternative medication. We'll let the doctor know, maybe the prescribed medication has restrictions, but there may be alternatives that are covered without restrictions. So we'll let the doctor know and the doctor will decide, what's appropriate. And and then we can help either get that medication covered through filing appeals, or sometimes we'll enroll the person in a different Part D plan. Depending what the situation is, it may be faster, actually, depending where we are in the month, to just get the person into a different plan if there's a plan that maybe covers the medication without restrictions. And then sometimes the caller has Medicare, but no Part D plan or prescription coverage. And so we would ask the person to send us a list of their medications, and we'll find a plan that either covers all their medications or covers most of them. And then we would work again with the doctor's office to get approvals in place, and we would help them enroll in that plan. And sometimes people call us because they may have a Part D plan that covers their medications, but they just can't afford the cost of the medications. And so what we would do is screen the person to see if they might qualify for extra help. And if they do, we would help them apply. And so, and we do this all through the phone. We would take the information, mail the application to the person for signature, have them mail it back. We send it to DHHS. We call to get it processed. And it just saves people so much money on their not only on their drug copays, but it means there's no deductible, there's no donut hole. Their Part D plans, certain ones are free for someone with extra help. So it saves people lots of money. And so, if you find, you're working with someone who's really struggling with the cost of their medications and they have Medicare, please send them to us, because it's just so important that people are able to access those benefits and get what they need to take care of themselves.
So here's an important takeaway this evening, and that is, you're just not sure if you have a legal problem. Don't worry about that. Don't let that be a barrier. You've got to concern or worry about your benefits or debt or paying your bills or how somebody's treating you. Call. If it turns out that it's not a legal problem, our intake paralegals are an amazing resource for people in terms of telling them where the right place to call is for the thing that they're dealing with. And so one thing I would just say is don't hesitate to pick up that phone and call, and we'll, if we can't help or it's not a legal problem, we'll definitely send you in the right direction. And then to recap on, and we'll open for questions again here in a minute. We do have two toll-free numbers, and if you called the wrong one, again, there'll be no issue. You'll just get seamlessly transferred to the right place. But we do have one for our legal assistance, which is the 800-750-5353, and then the other for the Medicare prescription drug related assistance that Jill was talking about just a just a few moments ago. Um, and again, because I know we had somebody join us late, I will recap. And I think we can probably drop the screen share, Jill, that it's just 60 and older and Maine residency that are our eligibility criteria. And you mentioned our partners and colleagues at Pine Tree Legal Assistance, and they're extraordinary. They do great work. But there are some types of problems that are much more commonly faced by older people that can be the kinds of problems that our lawyers are particularly expert in handling. And Medicare benefits would be an example of that, but also some of the very concerning things Jill included in her examples where there may be concerns about somebody being treated abusively in their home or being taken advantage of financially. Those are issues that our attorneys are really well versed in responding to and handling. So with that, we be happy to answer any more questions you have. If help us spread the word to your friends and neighbors, please. I know Margaret and others there have our helpline cards and some of our brochures. But we really ask everybody, friends and neighbors, to just be sure that you keep your ears open. You may not face one of these problems, but you may talk next week at the grocery store to somebody who is.
How could I get some brochures or something to put around town here? We have probably the oldest population per capita in the United States on Vinyl Haven.
Sure. Margaret, if you want to can you help make this connection via email, or how's the best? Otherwise, I can just give you my email right now. If you want to take it down, we'll
Sure.
just get your address and we'll ship things off to you, unless you suggest a different approach, Margaret.
What's your email?
So, initial J, Martin
Mm-hmm.
at, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's Maine LSE,
Mm-hmm.
MAINE LSE.org.
Thank you.
And if you just, we'd be happy to send hard copies of our Elder Rights Handbook if you thought people wanted them. And then we have both a small business card size thing that has the helpline number on it, and then a little bit bigger kind of placard. And we can send you a sampling to start, and you can always tell us you want more of something.
Okay, I think it'd be just great to have a few around town. I can take some. I
I
can have some up at the medical center too. I'll give them to them too.
That's fantastic. And we
Yeah.
really appreciate it. We do a lot of outreach to healthcare providers and all kinds of potential referral sources, but there's nothing better than somebody just walking through the door. It's been a pleasure to see and be with everybody, and tell your friends and neighbors maybe they should give a listen over a cup of tea sometime. So
Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you
excellent.
so much.
Yep.
Thanks,
Take care.
Margaret.
Thanks.
Thank
Night.
you.